Hello everyone, this is Petra Lohmeyer from Nivelle, and today is actually my free day, but I sat down this morning and I looked at one of these leadership manuals that I've gotten from one of the last leadership courses, and I just wanted to recap a couple of pages, and 6 hours later I was coming back from a walk, and this concept that had kind of enlarged itself in my mind, as it so often does, decided that I needed to write a LinkedIn post, and then I wrote another LinkedIn post to clarify the first LinkedIn post, and then I thought, well, if I leave it like that, then somebody else thinks that I'm going to diss what they're saying, and I needed to clarify that as well. So I wrote a third LinkedIn post, and then when I came back, I thought, okay, I really do need to make a podcast about this, because at the moment, as you may have noticed, I am in full transition mode, so the podcasts are not that frequent anymore, as we had already said will happen. But I still said that I will, if I have an interesting idea that is really helpful to me, I will still post it, and I will do this here. So in future, I will be a little bit more in flow, because I'm more in my divine feminine now, as opposed to the masculine that was very structured before. So I'm going to be flowing in and out a little bit. And that means also for the podcasts that they will probably be all in the same one. So we are going to have a little bit of spirituality, a little bit of AI maybe, and a little bit of win-win situations. And win-win situations have been a part of my life for all my life, and will be a part of my life for all my life, because that is part of the spiritual oneness for me as well, which I always felt a little bit, at least, in I think all parts of my life, but which has been much more prevalent in recent years. But we have so many win-win videos online already, where people can take a look at what win-win situations are between humans and nature, between businesses and nature that actually make a profit. And I will still be posting on LinkedIn articles about it as well. That I think there is enough there now, and I will still look and find something for each podcast that I do, that I put a little bit at the back, but there's enough for people who are not familiar with the concept yet to take a look at what it is. Spirituality is an interesting thing. I don't want to assume or put myself out as a guru, but there are some interesting spiritual insights that you can have about things that other people have already long published. And today I was looking at this leadership manual, and when I was looking at it, I thought, hey, wait a minute, this is the Eightfold Path, just in different, more modern language, and there's emotion in it. This is interesting. And I was processing it and looking at the Eightfold Path again. The Eightfold Path, again, is a concept out of Buddhism, one of the main fundamental principles, which were supposed to be repeated every year and taught every year. And I'll get to that a little bit later. And then for some reason, I was looking at LinkedIn, and there was a post about a lot of environmentalists in the last year that have died in the last year. And some of them were very young. One of them was only 30, and she killed herself because she couldn't deal with the bullying and all the grief that she got from other people because of her saving animals, and also what she was labeled and everything. And I was thinking about that. And then other things popped into my mind again, and this is how my mind works. This is my free day, and I just to read a book and revise a couple of pages, and 6 hours later I'm doing a podcast, because this idea doesn't go out of my head, and that just happens quite a lot. And that's how these podcasts come to be, because I know if I don't do this podcast now, we'll still be thinking in my dreams about this, and tomorrow the whole day. So it can just as well get out. Maybe it will actually help some people out there. So it was very interesting, though, what this developed into, because there is a concept in Buddhism, but also in other religions and spirituality in general, also in personal development, that people should be able to disentangle from their emotions. And then, because people do emotions, right? So people always think that they're a victim of their emotions, or that the outside can trigger emotions in them, but we are really doing emotions ourselves. They can be the same kind of outer stimulus, and people react in very different ways. So we are doing something internally to produce these emotions. Spirituality for decades or for centuries already has taught that disentanglement is very important. And I always hated this idea. Well, maybe not hated, maybe that is too strong a word, but I really disliked it. Why? Because, well, one of the experiences that I had in one of the businesses or several of the businesses that I worked in a certain industry is that people very much, and also the culture as well at the highest level, um, valued not having emotions at all. And I thought that was horrible because emotions are really love and compassion and joy are really the spice of life, the joy, the juice of life for me, and always were. And I really didn't like that. And they thought that if they deadened the emotion inside, that they would be stronger. And they even did this to their kids. You know, they broke their kids. They went on hunting and forced their kids to hunt animals in the army. They forced the soldiers to live with a pet and be really nice to it for 3 days and kill it. You know, a chicken, for example, or a little rabbit. And I thought that was a horrible thing. I mean, why would you do that to the and disentanglement kind of sounded to me like that, which it isn't, which it isn't. But that is why I didn't like the idea. And on top of that, disentanglement also said that you should disentangle from your positive emotions. Why to disentangle from my positive emotions? I like my positive emotions. I like being joyous. I like to love and to have compassion and to have joy. And why would I want to disentangle from that? So I didn't really understand this. And then I looked at the Eightfold Path, and here it is. Or where am I putting it? Here it is. And if you take a look at it, so the first stage is right thought. And the idea is with all these stages that the right thought, is the condition for all the others. And, you know, each one is conditioned for the one that follows. So it comes right thought, right resourcefulness. So the Eightfold Path is translated in different ways by different people, but this is what I just found online. At the front, it's pretty much the same in all the versions that I've seen. At the lower end, it varies a little bit because that is really where higher consciousness is, and a lot of the commentators may not actually be there. So it's, you know, it gets a bit fluffy there, but we're taking this for the moment. So it is right thought, which leads to right resolve, which leads to right speech, to right action, to right livelihood, to right effort, which leads to right mindfulness, which leads to right concentration. It said they're all right oneness. So the last three are really higher consciousness, and this is not necessarily what I'm getting to in this podcast, but the first ones are really quite easily to understand for everyone, right? Well, what I saw was there was no right emotion in there. Hmm. So then I thought, okay, why would you want to disentangle from emotion? Is emotion really, does it have nothing to do with this whole thing? And then I realized emotion actually comes in at every single stage of this, but at least in a stable environment, every one of these stages will be quite stable. You know, unless you have a war, you have to be really flexible in terms, but it will pretty much, if the outer conditions are pretty much the same, it will be the same thought. Like in business, for example, you know that you want to achieve a certain thing, then you will take a resolve on how you want to achieve it and why you want to achieve it, and then there will be speech, and there will be action. So this is all stable, but each one of these stages is actually enhanced by emotion, and it is made worse by emotion. So if I take a look at thought, for example, if I have empowering emotions like love, like joy, like compassion, for example, it will be positive thoughts which will influence everything afterwards. If it's at the stage of resolve, it will be a more powerful resolve if it's a resourceful reaction than if it's, for example, anxiety. If it's when I get to right speech, it will be more inspiring if it's a positive emotion. If I go to action, I will be more determined. And the same thing with unresourceful emotions. If I have negative emotions at the top, then I will probably, my resolve will be either in the wrong direction, so really destructive, or it could be really weak. And the same will then filter down through all these stages. So your whole tree is going to fall over, right? So then I thought, okay, how does a disentanglement come into this? And I've thought about the example of this woman who killed herself at 30 because she was bullied when she had a rescue center, right, for wild animals in Florida. And it's actually, why would you want to disentangle yourself from positive emotions? Well, for starters, positive emotions, if you hold on to positive emotions, in the end, well, that's okay. I'll get to this afterwards, but in the end, it will lead to addiction if you can't let go, right? But in her case, it wasn't an addiction, it was love and caring. But what are emotions? Emotions are flowing, emotions are flexible in their nature. They are not stable like these stages, right? They are flexible. So if something happens from the outside, a lot of times we take that as input to change that emotion. So if I have love, it can turn into hate. If somebody, hurts somebody that I love, then the emotion will turn into hate. If I have joy because of something and then it's taken away, it may become grief. So if I have firmly attached a certain emotion to any of these stages, especially in the beginning, and I cannot let go of it, when that emotion turns sour, that means it will affect the entire tree and the whole tree will fall down. And of course, there are actors who know that and who, if they want to derail you, will do exactly that for the whole tree to fall down. So, how do you defend yourself against that? How do you make it sustainable to do the right thing, to do good, to do something loving, and to get the right outcome? The only way you can do that is if you are able to disentangle. So you do hang on to the love as long as it is good, and as soon as it turns into hate or the joy turns into grief, you disentangle and use another emotion that is more resourceful. In that case, it may be courage or it may be determination. So this is how this whole fits in. The whole emotion bit fits in because emotions are, of course, the spice of life. They are what are a great drive, a great motivation, right? And the thing with the SSRIs that are oftentimes used in certain industries to deaden emotion, also deaden the pain and the love inside people, because that is what SSRIs do. You basically feel like you're dead, and that is not what I want, right? But what I do want is to be able to disentangle from the bad feeling. It's something that is, of course, hard to achieve. It is something to master. It is something that most people will probably take their entire life to master. But once you've actually noticed that you could do it once, it is an incredibly powerful thing to do because you can still, and it is what every one of us has probably done at some time, just not sustainable, not continuously. It is what doctors do when they help patients. They can't be, really distraught every time they see a patient who is sick because otherwise they're going to kill themselves too at some point, right? And it is what parents do when their children are sick and they have to do something really quick. Do they run around and panic and do nothing? No, they try to stay calm and to try to calm the kid, although they are feeling probably initially the panic inside. But what you do is you keep that panic in check. You disentangle from that panic and just get the kid to the hospital or get the pet to the hospital, for example, and then you panic probably, right? For a short period of time, every one of us has been able to disentangle from that emotion and use a more resourceful emotion like determination to get to that hospital, no matter what, and help no matter what. So I think this is a really interesting way to see that how in this path, in this Eightfold Path, if you really want to get to your outcome, be it in business or be it in life in general, and the last three stages are probably going to be about life and a more encompassing view of life than just your livelihood. I think until five, your livelihood, it is probably just going to be your business goal at that point. If you want to get there, it is really important that you can choose the emotions that you attach to each of these stages. And that doesn't mean that you're a psychopath who just pretends to have emotion, but that you look exactly on how do you produce these emotions and learn techniques which are out there. Tony Robbins, for example, is teaching how to change. Neuro-linguistic programming is teaching it. Psychiatry is teaching. Psychology is teaching how to change emotions that are attached to certain events, which means also you can change them at these different stages to make sure that when an emotion turns sour at this thought or resolve stage, for example, that you replace it with another emotion, with an emotion that is more empowering. Or sometimes it can just be that the emotion changes because you're bored, right? Emotions do change. They are in flow. That is a natural thing for this body. So it is a really important distinction, I thought. And it is something that could help people, especially who want to do good, to deal with the things on the outside in a more resourceful way, because we cannot control the outside. We can never control the outside. So if the outside can derail us from what we want to do, simply by doing something that changes our emotions at the top here, that is not what we want, right? That is when they win. And we don't want them to win when we do something really good. So this was the spiritual bit for today. I thought that was really interesting. Oh, another bit about emotion. If you hang on to it, again, that's addiction, of course, right? So if you hang on to positive emotion for too long, then you have the thought of you want that to have the positive emotion, resolve to have it no matter what. Then you have the speech and you take the action to get it no matter what, and that is what addiction is. So you also have to be able to disentangle from the positive emotion. So that is what the concept of disentanglement, at least to me, that was the idea today. Maybe it has helped somebody out there. Now we're going to come really quick to the AI bit. I promised that we're going to have a little bit of AI teaching just today. The AI bit is a very interesting thought process, and usually people just ask ChatGPT, for example. I use ChatGPT a lot to ask what they want. They kind of use it like a Google search tool in a way, and you can use it with very specific prompts in a much more detailed way. But what I actually found an interesting thought was to ask ChatGPT, once it knows you, and if you've used it for a while and you put in your information, then it will use you quite well at some point. I put in, I don't know, a number of different types of resumes, CVs, because I've done different things in my life. I also uploaded a book, for example, that I've written. It has looked at my website, so it is pretty clued up about me. So at some point I asked it, what am I missing about myself? What is something that I may not actually be aware of that I am? And that was an actually really interesting answer. So you can see it here, I think. And it was actually pretty spot on, because that is what I've done in all of my jobs almost. I even had a bridge up there behind me on the wall above that picture for a long time, for several years. There was a bridge on the wall because that is how I saw myself, as somebody who bridges the gap between certain disciplines. And sometimes of course, you get shot from both sides because they both think that you're betraying them in some way if they are battling each other. But a lot of times it is really what brings the peace. I mean, even when I was working for investment banks for Goldman, for example. I was negotiating contracts, and I never saw myself as a negotiator who is combative, who's trying to, screw over the other side. It was always about finding a compromise as fast as possible because we were scored on how fast we were negotiating these contracts. And people who wouldn't negotiate contracts fast, there was an Excel spreadsheet sent around every week, basically, of how many contracts were negotiated by who, right? And if you were in the bottom part, there was a good chance you were going to be let go. So we were trying to negotiate these contracts as fast as possible. It was during the credit crisis. There were a lot, it was a very hectic time. So I was trying to find ways to make these contracts work as fast as possible, and that is only if you find ways to find win-win situations with other people. So that was actually the beginning of my even calling it win-win situations. Even what I did later with nature and stuff. And it wasn't incredibly effective because if you're actually asking what the other party wants, then a lot of times the what you want can actually be accommodated if you just change the clause a little bit. Of course, when they then put in automation, they weren't very happy with me because I had amended all these clauses in these different ways that the early AIs couldn't actually recognize. But the later AIs, I'm sure, will be able to deal with my contracts. And it was a very healthy way of finding win-win situations with the other party, and to find ways to agree, right? So I did that there. I did that in later projects where I came from the legal department, but I was working with the IT department and with all kinds of different departments. And that was part of negotiation as well, not with the IT department, but with credit and treasury to coordinate what they wanted with the counterparty and basically be in the middle and basically find the win-win situations between all of them, which is a bridge building um, thing. And it's not the negotiators who were very combative and said, no, we want this and we're not going to do anything else. For starters, they were slower usually because then the other party also said, oh no, we want this. And on the other hand, also they sometimes missed good opportunities because they just said no and didn't realize that the counterparty was trying to give them something that was actually better for us. Right. So a lot of times that helps. With the IT departments as well, legal and IT usually don't work well together. And I was kind of the thing in between of explaining to IT how legal works, and IT explained to me how the systems worked and how this could work together. And it was actually the early stages of IT, basically, that we worked on. So I've done this in a lot of times, and then with win-win situations between humans and nature, of course, which was my business for the longest time now. So this was an actually really interesting analysis that I saw from ChatGPT, and it is something that you may want to ask ChatGPT if you've used it for quite a long time and it knows you quite well of what you're actually missing about yourself. It's an interesting thing to know, right? And now we are coming to the win-win situation of the week. Yes, and the win-win bit is really cool. So there are these two sisters, and you can see it here as well, who are actually taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and they make a cotton-like material with it. Isn't that cool? So they were apparently inspired by how trees are taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and make carbon out of it. And so they basically reproduce the process. It is just as good as all the other materials, apparently. So take a look at this post on LinkedIn. It is on my LinkedIn site, and you've got the link from them on here as well. You can see it here. So this is the future. So things are happening everywhere, and people have taken note that there are win-win situations between humans and nature that can actually make a profit. And this is one of them. Some things we really do love. So I wish you all the best. I don't know when the next podcast is going to be. So again, I'm going to be in flow a little bit, and this podcast is going to probably be posted in both the spiritual and the win-win bit. just to make people aware that things are going to be a little bit in flow in the future. In future, whenever I have a good idea or something comes up, I will post it, and will post it depending on whether it's in a win-win bit is more prominent, or the spiritual bit is more prominent in one of these podcasts. And I wish you all the best for the holidays and for the upcoming feast. And I wish you all the best for the new year, and maybe someday we will see each other there. All right, so all the best again, and happy holidays.